This book is written at the beginning of the 21st century. This century can either continue to roll inexorably forward as evolutionary history, following the ebb and tide of random forces that will buffet it towards its chronological conclusion, as wind and wave shunt driftwood towards some shore, or it can be fused into compelling intentionality by those with a capacity to understand in a certain way and to express what they perceive in a prophetic and irresistible rhythm, shape, and form. The future is not something out there that we step into as an already designed space. The future is ourselves as we choose to become, melded with the world as we inherit it and as we choose to arrange it. The future is alive with possibility to the extent that we are open to change. Change occurs most profitably in the wake of fundamental shifts in our way of being. These occur mostly because someone has imagined and described them. How do we even begin to envisage such possibilities? This vision of humanity and of the world we inhabit is the artist's task, writing the icon of our future face, preparing the skins that can carry the new wine, digging the trenches into which the waters can flow. Such is the pioneering work of the artist. Others do not have the sensitivity, the authenticity, the flair for capturing such evanescent originality. But others do have to build the future. We are those others. So, in whatever way and to whatever extent is possible, we must become aware of the direction in which the trailblazers are pointing, and the contours of whatever expansiveness they are proposing. As a civilization, we are required to read their poetry and understand their art until it becomes part of the instinctual gesture with which we mark out our future. This does not mean that we have to write poetry. It does not even mean that we have to read poetry ourselves. It does mean that someone has to produce the appropriate work of art and that our socio-cultural ambience has to become infused with the understanding that such art inspires, so that the movement forward which we instigate is initiated, energized, directed and informed by the spirit of that art, shaped by the space cleared for us by such work. The point of view I am presenting here, which is the point of view offered by a monk, is not necessarily the same as that of an artist or an academic. It will certainly not be as polished or as perfect. However, it is a point of view that might shed some complementary light. There is a kind of reading exercised by monks which is called Lectio Divina, or spiritual reading. It is reading as rumination, in a way a cow might chew the cud. Slow, attentive but dispassionate assimilation of a text. Such reading is usually exercised on the Bible or on theological or spiritual texts. It can also be exercised on works of art and literature in a reading of the signs of the times. Art is a privileged space, which allows room to dimensions and structures that otherwise remain buried in the everyday. Artists are prophets, in the literal sense of speaking out before their time. As they become the unwitting mouthpiece of the psychic secrets of their age, they are often as unconscious as sleepwalkers. So the philosopher is required to record, unravel, and present their dream time. There are at least three kinds of art. There is an art of propaganda, which tries to persuade you of a particular point of view. There's an art of entertainment, which can be highbrow or lowbrow, depending on whether your taste is for street ballads or metaphysical sonnets. And there's an art of excavation and exploration, seeking meaning where scientific words or normal human discourse can no longer be trusted to register the subtlety of what is being experienced. In this book, my concern is this third kind of art. On January 1st, 1901, the Times of London welcomed a new century with a series of questions. Will the last generation of the 20th century differ very much from the first? Will they be healthier and longer lived, wiser, better, and more intelligent, or will they remain substantially the same as the people we have known and the people whom history has portrayed to us? The New York Times hailed the 20th century's triumphant entry with banner headlines, and declared that the advance of the human race during the past 100 years has not been equalled by the progress of man within any of the preceding ages. Randolph Guggenheimer, president of the City Council, is quoted as hoping that in the new century, the rights of the individual man shall continue to be regarded as sacred, and that the crowning glory of the coming century shall be the lifting up of the poor, the annihilation of all misery and wrong, and that the peace and goodwill which the angels proclaimed shall rest on the contending nations as the snowflakes upon the land. Our experience of that same 20th century has taught us differently. These are destitute times. There may have been other times, other eras, when the truth of being became available in other ways, through other sources, through politics, religion, or philosophy, for instance. But in these times in which we live, the traces are few and the scent is poor. We have to rely for their detection on highly trained watchdogs with a keen sense of smell. Artists are in one specific order, prophets are in another. People need both orders. Art as prophecy is something that happens to an artist. It concerns the whole being of the artist, the total personality. It passes through artistic sensitivity and emerges as poetry almost as if the words of the poem were drops of sweat. The artist may not even be aware of all that is happening. In a certain sense, he or she is being used as a mouthpiece. This does not mean, therefore, that such an artist then assumes the role of a prophet, preaching, teaching, and calling to order. This is a very different stance. It may be that the artist is called to assume both roles, but whether or not this is the case, the second role is the lesser. Whereas, on the contrary, in the other order of art, the prophetic kind is of the highest order. Other kinds of art, whether propaganda, protest, or popular song, are less important. What I am calling prophetic art is where and how something more than the artist could have accomplished on his or her own infiltrates and emerges with the art piece. The work of artists is original. My work is derived. In this book I attempt to explain as clearly and as simply as I can, without thereby losing the subtlety of what has to be elucidated, the truth that I have gleaned from following behind artists, harvesting possible shapes for the future. Because the important possibility is this: there is no future as some kind of panorama laid out beforehand. There is no God, no soothsayer, no fortune teller who can describe its contours and its shape by some magic or psychic insight. The future does not exist until it happens, and we are the ones who make it happen. The future is neither a blank page, nor is it an already designed house into which we are required to move. The future is what we build together, what we create together. It can be an ugly, vulgar extension of what we already are, or it can be an invitation to being to infiltrate and expand the reality of what we might become. This happens through the aegis of those who are gifted with metaphysical insight, who in our times are mostly artists and poets.